Hello, listeners. Welcome to Shuff Dives You Crazy podcast.
All right. Hello, everybody. This is Shuff, and this is Shuff Dives You Crazy podcast. And this is the first episode of this podcast series that I'm creating. And the first guest is David Strike. David Strike is a ex-Royal Navy diver, commercial, recreational, and technical diver as well. And he is also a speaker and presenter at a lot of regional and international diving events. A former field editor for Asian Diver magazine and author of several hundred articles about diving, and has created and organized several world-class technical dive events, and is a fellow of the Explorers Club of New York. He is what I would call a legend in the dive industry and also a dear friend, and has sort of become a mentor to me in speaking about technical diving. So, welcome, David, or Strikey.
Chef, that was absolutely marvelous. Can't wait through that. This is a guy I'd like to meet. Mate, it's lovely to be here, and it's lovely to be able to chat with you again. It's been quite some while since we last sort of spent any appreciable time talking.
Yeah, last time was 2018 ADEX.
Wow.
So, for the listeners, Strikey, could you just tell them about yourself?
I can. It starts to sound a bit like a cracked record because I sort of start like this, telling people that I grew up in London, or the outskirts of London, um, immediately after the Second World War. So my grandfathers, both of them, had been in one was in the Royal Navy, the other one was a Royal Marine. One of my dad's father, he was in the Navy. One of his two sons, one of my uncle was a commercial diver. He had travelled the world and was returning full of loot that he pillaged from wrecked ships and vessels. And on the other side of the family, there was another relative who was also something to do with diving, someone that I'd never met. So the Navy played a very significant part in my life. And even at the end of the 40s, I can still remember being taken down to Portsmouth in the UK, the Navy base there, HMS Excellent. And a friend of my dad's, a chief petty officer, had invited him down. And so I would have been, say, 4 years old. And the thing that I remember most about that visit, HMS Excellent, was one, at lunchtime, the chief petty officers had a tot of rum, and they shared some of it with my dad, but they didn't even give me a sip of it, the miserable pickles. The other thing, they had a little zoo at HMS Excellent, and there was a jackdaw in a cage that used to talk and probably swore, but at the age of 4, I didn't really understand that. And the other thing, they also kept a piggery there. And one of the pigs had escaped or was being chased by a sailor dressed in overalls carrying a huge, what in later years I always thought was a cutlass, but was probably a plank of wood, screaming abuse at this pig for running away. Just literally bowled me over. It was. So that was HMS Excellent. But immediately from there, we went down to watch two of the charioteers, the human torpedoes from World War II, going through their paces in one of the flooded up dry dock. And I thought, wow, this is absolutely fantastic. Here's these two guys sitting on a human torpedo with a warhead, dressed in sleek black rubber suits. They really look the part. And I guess at that stage, you thought, boy, it wouldn't be too bad being a fogger. looks sort of quite exciting. So that was really sort of roughly the start. I can't imagine or can't even think of a time when I didn't want to be a diver. And it was that episode that probably stimulated the idea. And later, I joined the British Sub-Aqua Club, did some basic training with them. This was the era of do-it-yourself diving, largely. So a lot of the equipment that they had would be old cylinders from aircraft, actual oxygen cylinders topped up with compressed air, but twin hose regulators. Those that were fortunate enough to have a wetsuit, usually homemade wetsuits that were held together with neoprene cement and tape and a lot of faith in the construction of the suit. But most people just wore woolly jumpers because the wool sort of helped retain the heat. So it was, as I say, very much a do-it-yourself time. And when I was old enough, I say when I was old enough, I could have joined the Navy at about the age of 15 or so. But I really didn't fancy that. I got a job working for the Times newspaper in London, worked for them for 2 years in what is euphemistically termed their intelligence department. I was involved in research. The guy in charge of the intelligence department was a former Royal Navy officer who had been in intelligence during the Second World War. So when he learned that I was very interested in joining the Navy, he gave me enormous encouragement. So at the age of 18, I joined the Navy. And at that stage, the choices available were a whole range of choices for careers. The seaman branch was largely sort of close to me. Apparently, I was red and green colourblind, which does not go down well if you're standing on the bridge of a ship looking at the navigation buoys, red and green. The next one I had a look at was how to be a stoker. Instead of standing out on a deck in a heaving North Atlantic gale, freezing to death, you can be down below in the nice warm, in the engine room, the boiler rooms of the ship. I joined up as a stoker. And eventually, after training, was assigned to my first ship, a diesel frigate, the Chichester. And we would watch the Chichester grow from refit. And one day, a notice appeared on the notice board. Volunteers for diving duties. So in those days, you couldn't join up directly as a diver. You had to volunteer for diving duties. So I applied, was paraded in front of the ship's diving officer, who said, "Okay, away you go." So I was sent off to Plymouth, the second largest diving docks in the UK. And to the diving school there, which was the entry-level diving school for the Navy, at HMS Drake. And at the age of literally just turned 19, kit bag over my shoulder, presented myself to the chief petty officer in charge of the diving school. And like chief petty officers everywhere, "What's your name, lad?" And I said, "Strike, Chief, Strike." He said, "Strike, mate. I've got some relatives called Strike. What's your father's name?" "Oh, Roy, Chief." He said, "Roy, eh?" He said, "I'm your uncle, lad. You will pass this flaming course." And I thought, "Ripper, there is absolutely nothing wrong with this at all. I'll have an easy time with it." But regrettably, I mistook what he meant as an order for a statement of fact that I would pass. And as soon as the petty officers and leading hands running the actual training sessions found out that I was related to the chief, made my life absolute hell. So about 30 of us actually started, and gradually they whittled down the numbers. People actually failed themselves. They would just say, that's it, I'm giving up going. It was a basic 4-week course to start with. And I still remember my first night dive. It was wearing lead boots with a surface. We trained as well in surface demand. Surface demand, no light, just going down on a shot rope over what I thought was a bottomless pit. And it was one of those days when the rain and sleet were blowing sideways. The little dive boat was bouncing out. And the petty officer said, right, we need a first volunteer strike, you will do. So I was given these boots, dressed up in a dry suit, surface demand equipment, thrown over the side, and had to descend 120 feet down to the shot, which was, as I say, suspended over this bottomless pit. It was dark. All that I could see was swirls of bioluminescence swirling around. And the water was cold. And I thought, this is horrible. This is absolutely terrible. When I get up, I'm going to pack it in. This is not what it's about. Oh, that I thought, of course, if I pack it in, that uncle's going to be really sort of angry with me. When I got up, the petty officer running the train handed me a mug of hot soup, a cigarette, because you smoked in those days. He said, right, he said, the condition's too bad now. We won't do any more tonight. And we steamed off away. And at that point, I would have packed it in, were it not for the fact that my teeth were chattering with the cold. I was too cold to say anything. So by the time we got back, I thought, I'll stick it out for one more day and one more day. And in the end, 3 or 5 of us of the 30 actually passed. So, and then, of course, you got the gold diving helmet badge, great for attracting women. And you received an additional 4 shillings a day extra pay, which doesn't sound an awful lot, but it amounted almost the equivalent of 1 day extra pay each week. Yeah, so not bad.
That's cool. Out of 30, you made it?
Yeah,
Yeah, you just held on.
yes.
Yeah, that was sort of like when I did the clearance diver course in India. There was, I think at the start, over 120 candidates. It was a 4-month training, and in the end, remaining 21, 22 out of that 120, 125 people.
It's probably exactly the same. The people fail themselves. They're not by the instructors.
There was a point where after the first month, I was about to even give up.
Yeah.
They made us do something really, I wouldn't consider it even healthy. Where they made us wear this dry suit, which was like, to me, I was like the Michelin man wearing that dry suit. And they made us do circuits,
Mud runs.
not even mud, on a tar parade square at noon in that heat in India, in Cochin.
Oh,
After about 2 hours of that, I was like literally about to give up. I was like, okay, this is enough.
some terrible things happen on parade ground. During the basic training, we had 303 Lee Enfield pistols, which weigh exactly 9 pounds. So you're supposed to jog around with this bouncing on your shoulder. And if you weren't marching properly or got out of step, gunner instructors carrying out the training used to, and frequently I had to stand in a dustbin in the middle of the parade ground with a 303 rifle over my shoulder, just yelling out, I am rubbish, I am rubbish. So it's character building.
It sure does. It sure does. Going through a military training, it sure builds a character if you have that discipline, not
Yeah.
to give up. How do you compare the Navy diver trainings from your time to now? I know there's a lot of changes that has happened.
The equipment, fairly obviously, has changed dramatically. In my day, I was right on the cusp of the move from oxygen rebreathers to compressed air, the use of compressed air, open circuit. So the O2 rebreathers were single hose, the pendulum breathing, yeah, to really sort of pump gas through that hose to eliminate any carbon dioxide buildup. The open circuit twin hose, there was no buoyancy control devices. The dry suit itself was a neck entry dry suit. So you had to have an attendant stretching it in order to get in. There were metal clamps then that positioned your neck seal in place. So if you were doing a high point entry, you had to hang on to the seal to stop getting a fractured jaw from the neck ring bouncing up. So the equipment itself has changed sort of dramatically. Probably because of occupational health and safety concerns and political correctness, a lot of the bastardry has changed. But I think, a lot of it is still exactly the same, probably sort of sent down with a hacksaw and a piece of angle iron and zero visibility, told to saw, and they put the hacksaw blade in the wrong way round, so you had to change that underwater. All of those silly things.
What got you into technical diving in the tech industry?
Going underwater for the very first time, Chef. I'm one of those people that actually believe all diving is technical. I think probably the worst thing that's ever been perpetrated on diving is to suggest that one aspect of it is technical and the rest of it's not. It's created this them and us attitude for a lot of people. People use the equipment. The equipment is secondary in diving. It's attitude that counts. And the people that want to go beyond those recreational diving limits, the explorers, if you like, the Richie Colas, the Jill Hyners, these are people, they're driven to find out, to discover what lies beyond those arbitrary limits set by the better established training organisations. So what got me into technical diving? When we came to, I worked on the North Sea oil rigs, so I'd been involved, if you like, in a degree of technical dive, what we would term technical. Coming to Australia, I became an instructor here, and I was rather sort of fortunate in that the company that I joined was a well-established one, and the chief instructor was the former Royal Australian Navy clearance chief petty officer. So we taught commercial diving. That was, if you like, as close as it got to, in those days, technical. Later, the person who had been my assistant instructor in that period, a guy called Bob Casey. Rob set up his own dive school. He was still serving Royal Australian Navy officer at the time. And Bob became very, very interested in the technical diving movement that was starting to take place largely in the States, with a number of people then going beyond those recreational limits. It started people like Bill Hamilton, who was the diving go-to person for diving or decompression in those days. Bob was deeply interested in advancing diving. And so much so, he always used to say that within a short space of time, people would be learning to dive on rebreathers. This was back in the 70s. So Bob was influential. He went across to the States in the 90s, very early 90s, got in touch with Tom Mel, IAND, as it then was, did a course over there, came back as the regional manager for IAND. So I took him to the airport one week, picked him up from the airport about 5 or 6 days later. And a few days after that, we did the first nitrox course here in Australia. And there were a number of people then that were interested. Nitrox, of course, at that stage, excited tremendous controversy. Gas of death. Divers shouldn't be using it. Skin Diver magazine in the States were preaching, or the editor was preaching against its use. It's just awful. And trying to convince people that, hey, it's not devil gas. It's just simple. And if anything, by doing that nitrox course, people became a little more aware, perhaps, of decompression issues as well. Certainly here in Australia, that was the defining moment, I think, that separated normal recreational diving from technical diving.
That's interesting. So you did it in the 70s, you said, right?
No, this was in the 90s, 91, I think, we did the first course.
I read about nitrox, I think, in one of the the early Asian diver.
I wrote the bloody article. Yeah.
That's how I got to know who this David Strike is. There was the column Strike Back, right, at the end of.
Later, then, Rainer Segel had started Asian Diver magazine. This was just before we did the nitrox thing. And Rainer is German. He lived in Singapore. He was a diver. He had this idea for a diving publication. And he'd appointed Julia Go as the editor. And they were looking for advertising representation in Sydney. And my previous company that I'd had was a media representation company. So teach diving part-time and then full-time was running the media representation company. And we looked after publications from all around the world. The Washington Post, the New Yorker magazine, the Times in London. We had about 76 different titles. And we received this letter from Ryder saying, looking for advertising representation. Wow, that's it. I had a bit of a health scare at that time and thought, well, I'm going back full-time into diving anyway. With my declining years, I didn't expect to still be alive at this stage, Chef, I have to tell you. It's a bit of a disappointment in many respects. So in the 90s, I sold my interest in the business to my partners and said, look, if it took the partners, is it okay? I'd like to continue with this magazine, do something with it. They were fine. So I got in touch with Rainer. He was out at lunch at the time. I spoke to Julia, the editor, and said, tell him I'll commit ritual suicide on television unless he appoints me as the regional magazine. And that's how we started. And it was just absolutely wonderful. We just clicked.
My dad got me the first issue of Asian Diver magazine, actually, in 97,
91.
91. Yeah. Yeah, my dad was based in Singapore that time. And he got me an issue because I was always interested in diving after watching all these Cousteau series and all that. And I've done a few dives behind my family's back on one of the resorts.
And the magazine was, it was just wonderful. It was it was the perfect timing for it as well. And interestingly, Rainer was very progressive in his thinking. And I'd been a member of the Pacific Asia Travel Association. Each year we used to have a major conference in one or other of the major cities around the region. And they would, the people that would attend would be the chief executive officers of, say, major airlines, all the hotels, the national tourism bodies, absolutely anyone that was involved in tourism in that Asia Pacific area. It was the place to meet people. It was just magnificent. We went to the one in Hawaii in 1993, I think. That's where I introduced him to another person in Singapore, an English guy, Chris Sweeting, who ran a series of travel publications. And we went out diving for the day. And that's how the two sort of first met up and then started the first dive show in the region.
I don't know if you remember, I first met you in I think it was 2004 ADEX. I just went, introduced myself. I'm Shaf from Maldives. I read a lot of articles about you, and
So polite?
yeah, you were busy. There was one of the Cousteau.
Oh, Jean-Michel Cousteau.
Yeah, you were with him. You both were a bit busy, so just said hi, bye, and then and then yeah, you invited me for the tech talks years after that.
They were sort of fun. What I have noticed, the difference in the audiences between, say, the Asia area and the States or the UK, Europe, and Australia is that you tend not to attract the same numbers of participants as you do in other parts of the world. But those that you do are deeply interested. It was so much fun watching the growth of diving throughout the region.
When I started diving, I did it because I loved watching all these series. And then my family took us to a resort in the Maldives in the 80s, late 80s. And then there was this Italian guy in a thong. I don't even want to get that image in my head. So I was like, I went on to the dive school and he was there. I asked him, could I try it? And he said, yeah, of course, can try it. He didn't explain anything except just remember to pinch your nose, blow out if you feel any pain. So just put me in like those, it was Scuba Pro, those jackets.
Oh, yes.
Not the fancy, but
the orange.
The orange one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Put me in that, a mask, tank on the back, took me into the lagoon, dropped me down to 6 to 8 meters, I think. No explanation, nothing. Didn't even tell me how to clear my mask. But I was, wow, hooked.
I'm glad that you said that, because that was my first. We left the UK, sailed through the Med, down through the Suez Canal, the Red Sea, on to the Maldives.
I was going to ask you about that.
So then we got to the Maldives and we pulled into Adu Atoll. So the benefit of people that might not be aware is I think it's just below the equator, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. The southernmost atoll. And the island of Gan is one of the major islands in the atoll. And the lagoon there was an old tanker. It had been torpedoed by a German submarine during the Second World War. And that became like a refueling post for ships on their way to the Far East from the UK. And the island of Gan itself, originally during the Second World War, had been taken over by the Royal Navy's Fleet Air. The highest point in Gan was probably about 6 feet above sea level. Huge big runway through it. And it was ideal. It's just strategically located. And later, the Fleet Air Arm handed over control to the British Royal Air Force. And they had a contingent based there and flights coming out from the UK to all points east were stopped there. And as we pulled into the lagoon, we received a radio message from the Royal Air Force contingent on the island saying, "Do you have a diver on board? We'd like the services of a diver to help us with the problem." And so I was detailed off to go and help them, and I thought, this is just fantastic. Obviously, an aircraft has come screaming down the runway, gone off the end. This is going to be a salvage job. I was really looking forward to this. So I was put into the one of the ship's whalers, or one of your ship's whaler, taken to shore where we were met on the jetty by a group of Royal Air Force officers and NCOs. And we pulled in. I was already kitted up, ready to go, just an undersuit, because the dry suit, as you know, far too hot to wear. So it was just an undersuit. We did no buoyancy vests or anything. Used your lungs to swim up there. And got there, said, "Okay, what's the job?" And one of the officers said, "Well, Sergeant Smith here, as you can appreciate, there's not much to do on the island of Gam." And Sergeant Smith and some of his colleagues were sitting on the end fishing one day. And someone told a joke, as one does, and Sergeant Smith started laughing and then started to choke a little. So his friend slapped him on the back, at which point his false teeth fell out and went screaming into the water. Sergeant Smith, we could either fly him to Singapore to get new teeth, which quite a costly exercise, of course, or if you could find them, then sweeten the pot by saying, "And there's a crate of beer in it for you," if you could find them. So I hopped over the side of the boat, went down into crystal clear water. The first time I had ever seen crystal clear water, surrounded by all of these colourful fish and coral outcrops. It was just magic. And the sand was pure white. And there, sitting on the sand, as I descended, I could see it, a set of false teeth, which I immediately picked up, stuck under the sleeve of the undersuit. And then I remembered the words came back to haunt me from that chief petty officer at the diving school, who said, "Never make it look easy, lad." So for the next 3/4 of an hour or so, I went swimming around the lagoon and just had the time of my life. It was just wonderful. Oh,
Did you go back after that?
no,
Really?
really. No, never been back.
Maybe we should arrange something then.
Yes, before I shuffle off this mortal coil.
Yeah. Like I said, that was my first dive, and I just been hooked on ever since. And like you said, diving crystal clear waters.
Well, it's about, apart from there's the act of discovery itself. Find an actual wreck that's been sunk, that's through enemy action or environmental action, rather than being purposely sunk. When wrecks are purposely sunk, they're usually sanitized, clean. You know that you're not going to find a gold doubloon, for example, or a piece of treasure, or there's nothing to actually pick up anymore. To find a wreck, just incredible. That would be that spirit of exploration that everyone has.
Yeah, I've dived a few wrecks that's quite deep in the Maldives. No recreational divers have ever done those. So it's really interesting, like you say, just finding these wrecks. And one of the most beautiful wrecks that I've ever done, which was the British Navy aircraft carrier HMS Hermes
Hermes,
off the coast of Sri Lanka.
yes.
And that was a magical dive as well. We did 4 dives, me and Darshana.
And what were you using? Were you on gas at all? Mixed gas, or were you on air?
We did on air because it was a bit hard to get mixed gas in Sri Lanka. So we did, the bottom gas was air, and then we had nitrox for,
Decoy.
yeah. It was a really amazing dive.
Yeah,
And knowing the story behind it.
yeah. The Rod MacDonald has published. There's a book by Rod MacDonald, who actually, Rod was one of the speakers we had over here at some stage from Scotland, and he's written a number of books now about various wrecks parts of the world, and that story is just superb.
I read the story, and they moved from Sri Lanka, I think from the Navy base in Trincomalee, and then moved to Addu in Maldives to evade the Japanese bombing of Sri Lanka. And then on their way back to Sri Lanka, they got bombed.
Yes.
I think there's one more ship, HMS Vampire, that's still unaccounted for. Nobody has discovered it.
Talking about those, or the wrecks of the South China Sea, all the way through, and that area of the Indian Ocean, salvage pirates that seem to be given a free hand to just destroy and desecrate one of the war graves, like the Prince of Wales, the Repulse, the Perth, all of these wonderful vessels that have just been trashed.
So, what is your most favorite dive so far, other than the one looking for the false teeth in the Maldives?
Favorite dive? I'd have to look into dive logs that I have, but one that took place in 1984, and it was with my son, and we were in Hawaii, and we dived on one of the wrecks in Hawaii, and it was one of those beautiful days when the visibility was just perfect, and it's around about 100 feet. And we were ready to ascend. We'd explored the outside, a few little swim areas on the vessel, and just ready to ascend. And we just watched our bubbles rising above us. And it was just a wonderfully warm sort of moment. So, yeah, that was memorable. Or favourite. I don't know that I've got a favourite dive. I mean, I've got many memorable ones.
I see on your post that you dive a lot in your neighborhood. Is it Shelly Beach?
Yes, Shelly Beach.
How is it diving there?
Wonderful. It's interesting, and I'll bring Reiner's name back into it. After quite a few years, Reiner came down to Sydney to visit, and I said, "You've got to come diving at Shelly Beach." And he was a bit reluctant, mainly because the water temperature fairly obviously wasn't, or he wasn't expecting it to be anywhere on a par with many of the dive sites that he was more used to in the Asian region. And he arrived, said, "Look, it's summer. It's going to be about 23 degrees, so pitched him up." And being the obnoxious bastard that I am, pompous git, I said, "I've got a little menu here, Ryder. What would you like to see? We've got Port Jackson sharks. We've got wobbegons. We've got angel sharks. We've got giant cuttlefish. We've got," and all of these various. And do you know what? It's one of those dives when actually you're swimming along, you go, "Oh, look, there's another wobbegon. Oh, look, there's a Port Jackson shark. Oh, look, there's an angel shark. Oh, look, there's a giant cut." We saw everything. And exiting on the beach after the dive, maximum about 14, 15 meters that we've been depth-wise. As he exited the water, the regulator literally dropped from his mouth and he said, "I cannot believe that we're within half an hour of an international airport." It's since been declared a marine protected area. So
Do you get great whites coming down that area?
Um, the short answer is yes, because apparently one of the teeth that I found was identified as that of a great white. Have I seen any there? No. Grey nurse sharks, you see a lot of. Dusky whaler sharks. The other one, like the port jacks on the Angels, the cat sharks. I can't recall anyone actually seeing a great white or a white pointer in the Shelley Beach area. That's not to say that they're not there. They probably are.
So, for a beginner or a diver who's just certified or want to get into the professional side of diving as a guide or an instructor, what advice would you give them?
I honestly don't know. It depends so much on the individual and what their background is. And it's, I think for most people in diving, it's a passion that drives them. It's the love of diving. The idea of actually making money out of diving seems to be lacking. I don't know of I mean, some people have made an absolute fortune, but they would be few and far between. I'd just say to look, just indulge your passion while you can, but also prepare for a change of direction at some perhaps later stage in your life. If you have any professional qualifications, maintain those professional qualifications as well. And don't stop learning. And that's the main thing. A lot of people aspire to become an instructor because wrongly they believe that an instructor is sort of sits on the right hand side of God. Very, very few of them do. An awful lot of instructors are not there because they really want to teach someone to dive. They're there because it is a badge that they wear.
True. I was in Maldives last June. I did a couple of dives and I met a few instructors. After the dive, I was like, who the heck certified you? There was some running out of air at almost 26 meters. These are instructors. And then showing me that they're on almost over 30 minutes deco.
To my way of thinking, it's comparatively, well, not comparatively, it's very easy to become an instructor. And for people that, well, I don't want to make a living out of diving, it's an obvious way to go, and one that's encouraged by the training organisations themselves, because that's where the bulk of their money and income comes from. It's one of the most interesting things about diving. Trying to compare the diving industry with other industries is, to my way of thinking, almost impossible. And I say this from having some sort of knowledge of many other industries through the various publications that I looked after and the organisations that I had to deal with. The diving industry is absolutely unique, mainly in the sense that when many of us learned to dive, we did so at a time when there was an element of danger to it, an element of risk. And that was really sort of something. It's an industry that's full of alpha personalities. Now, alpha personalities, I go on to say, talking about this, that one of the most overused terms in diving is teamwork. Alpha personalities are really not cut out of teamwork. Quite sort of remarkable. I still find it sort of quite funny, amusing. When I ran an organised Oztech, and I'd get the various speakers, and so one or two of them, I would gladly confess, everyone there, all of those speakers, all thought that their ego was bigger than mine.
Yeah, you're right about the industry because I've met a few instructors in the Maldives their ego is like through the roof, even though they just became dive instructors.
I'm going to go back a little bit. After leaving the Navy, I went diving on the North Sea oil rigs as an offshore commercial diver. And this was at a time when the North Sea had just opened up for offshore oil gas exploration. And the fatality rate was through the roof. Divers on the North Sea gas and oil platforms, the insurance actuaries said that it was the most dangerous occupation in the world. It beat being a coal miner or anything else. And for that reason, a lot of the companies used to employ ex-service personnel because the ex-service personnel had all learned to work as a team. Still be alpha personalities, but they had learned the value and the necessity of teamwork, mental discipline to apply it properly. And that's something that, to my way of thinking, is sadly lacking in recreational diving. And when I say recreational diving, I'm also including technical aspects of diving, because that once again has just become a badge for so many people. Depth has become an end in itself. At a personal level, I regard deep diving as anything where the water depth, if I'm standing up on the seafloor, comes up above my nostrils, i.e. about 175 centimetres. Anything deeper than 175 centimetres is deep diving.
That's a good one. I've been criticized a lot due to my stand on this. You must have heard zero to hero in
Yes.
6 months. So a lot of people in the Maldives especially criticize me because I'm against it. But I think that's the wrong way to produce or become dive masters.
Couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, it's not that long ago. I think we both, there was a person who shall remain nameless on social media, both sort of laid into her. I say laid in, we were less than complimentary.
Yeah, towards her comments on certain type of training.
Yes.
Yeah, that's something that I'm telling a lot of people who ask me what my views on, because they want to be instructors, they want to be dive masters, and then I said just take your time, do as many dives you can, learn, and just not try to compress it into 6 months and get a badge or a certificate. And so I get all the heat for that.
It's, and at the end of the day, it's recreational. It's supposed to be fun or enjoyable. You know, the personal level now, I think I've reached that sort of stage in life where if something is not fun or enjoyable, I really don't want to be involved with.
Yeah. And what's next for you? Any other books coming up?
Oh, yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. Actually, there are. I actually have plenty of time to complete the 2-volume thing,
Okay.
which is almost a personal memoir and history as well. So it's historical diving, but a little bit of a personal memoir. And one also that's up to arriving in Australia. And then the second one is in Australia, the people that one meets.
I've also got two. One is a republication, just putting some new photos of the colors of the ocean book that I published. So some new photos. So it's going to be a new edition, hopefully come out next year. And then the other book with all these stories from people.
I can imagine there's some lovely ones out there.
Oh yeah, I've been getting quite a few now, and it's slowly it's coming into place. So yeah, it's gonna be fun to read, I guess, for all the readers.
Yeah, it's and there are so many books around now. But it's I think it's nice just from at a personal level to do those sort of things. Not the aim of fame and fortune, because, well, the fame is just a fleeting thing anyway, and fortune, well, you're hardly likely to make a fortune. As we've seen, the decline in magazines and newspapers, the print media is in decline now. Social media takes over.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting the books done. See how it is. And the documentary about the 50-hour dive will hopefully be out next year.
Right.
That's something that I'm looking forward to as well.
You have a young family now.
Yeah. So no more crazy stuff. David, it's been really nice catching up with you.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I do look forward to the series. I wish you all the very best, and thinking about the people that you know and that are likely to chat with. I think it'll be a fascinating series. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. And
Well, it's good to see you.
thank you, David. Maybe we'll catch up somewhere, maybe in the Maldives, or maybe in Australia.
Yeah, it'd be nice. As I say, it's absolutely wonderful to be able to chat with you. Mate, you take care of yourself.
You too.
Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye. And that was David Strike. And thank you for listening to the first episode of Shuff Dives You Crazy.